What's good, everybody? Welcome back. Justin Henry Show live on the J-Head Fantasy Channel, man. Listen, we're going to be doing Start and Sit 'em live. I'm going to start doing this again. I've been kind of going back and forth on if I wanted to do this live because I like getting through the games, but it is tough to sit there and just try to get this shit all out to you guys. So I want to make sure you guys get this information as quick as possible. And so what I'm going to do from now on, just so you guys know, I got to turn off the chat, y'all. Got to turn off the chat, my bad. Just so you guys know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the games game by game, and then I will re-release them after the live, and then that's when the live will be off. But I want you guys to be able to get this information beforehand. I don't even know if I'm going to re-release them separately, but I am going to go over every single game right now. And then answer questions at the end, probably a little bit. It's going to be a longer show, so this is typically about a 2-hour show. So grab your drink, grab some food, whatever it is, man, and let's get to it. So appreciate everybody got to the chat early. Like I said, I'll get to chat questions afterwards. Start and sits will be after the week 2 rankings will be up on J-Hen Fantasy very soon. And then also this in, fantasy preview as opposed to the note sheet will be up as well a little bit later. So like I said, it's just a lot for me to try to manage right now. I just want to set the bar here, a new bar, so that way you guys get the information and, I'm not letting y'all down if you're looking for a certain thing. So sorry, got to switch it up. Hopefully everybody's doing well, man. It's week 2, and so obviously week 1 was full of a lot of disappointment at the receiver position, just a lot of disappointment in general fantasy-wise. Wasn't a whole lot of, 3 touchdown games and, quarterbacks throwing for 5 touchdowns and shit. Like, we didn't have a whole lot of, blow-up games. So I'm anticipating this weekend we probably see a little bit more, especially from the receiver end. We probably see a lot more as far as production. So for anybody who's worried about their players, their elite players, you got to give it time. All right? So give it time. Don't overly panic on your A.J. Brown, your Jamar Chase, Nico Collins. There's a lot of players who we drafted early who didn't do well. So let's get to the games. I want to make sure we get into it. There are a lot of injuries this week that are starting to pop up. Want to kind of temper expectations. A major injury out of San Francisco before we start. Brock Purdy expected to be, out for a few weeks. Mac Jones looks like he's in line to start at least right now and probably for another few weeks. So this is a multi-week thing, supposedly, from the Niners side. They're saying that Brock Purdy's toe could be a thing that bothers him for a few weeks. They're holding him out. Mac Jones looks like he is in line to start. So if you have Brock Purdy, make sure you get another quarterback. And then as far as Xavier Worthy, we got a positive update on Xavier Worthy today. Andy Reid came out and said he is week to week, but they're not putting him on IR, and he's not getting surgery. So it's probably one of the best things that could happen for you if you have Xavier Worthy. If you spend a whole lot on Hollywood Brown, you're probably not going to see that return because at some point Xavier Worthy is going to be back, all right? So if I had Xavier Worthy, I would be optimistic. If he was available in a league, I might even be looking to go get him. Like if I could get him at a discount, not necessarily face value, but at a discount. All right, I already went over the Washington and Green Bay game, so I'm not going to double back on that heavyweight matchup. I'm not going to double back. This one is available on YouTube. So if you missed this one, I already dropped this video. It's also on the J-Hen Fantasy page. You can check this preview out. It's going to look a little different for the rest of the games on both channels. But for now, if you want to see a full game preview, the Green Bay-Washington game is already up. As far as the Jacksonville game, Jacksonville is 3.5-point dogs going into Cincinnati. This is the highest total of the week, 49.5 points on the board. So when it comes to this game, I'm expecting fireworks. We didn't really see that from the Jacksonville Panthers game last week. And we kind of saw it with the Cleveland and Cincinnati game, but not to the level that we wanted on the Cincinnati side. So for those worried about Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas, Travis Hunter, I wouldn't be worried. Let's see what this thing looks like over the next week or two before we start to panic. This Bengals defense is, it's kind of Swiss cheese. So we saw Trevor Lawrence. They had the game where they had to take a break. Brian Thomas, only 1 catch on 7 receptions. He did have the rushing touchdown, which salvaged the day. But we did see Travis Hunter also get involved heavily with, at least volume, right? It was, 6 targets on the day. So I think Travis Hunter is locked into that Chris Godwin role. Brian Thomas is going to be, it seems like he might be a little splashier than we want. He did have 7 targets, only brought the 1 in. So I'm not overly worried about it right now. New coordinator, Trevor Lawrence first game back after last year's injury. Let's see what this thing looks like for a couple weeks against a good defense. a decent defense for them, matchup wise. And then as far as Travis Etienne, locked in as a high-end RB2. A lot of questions about Travis Etienne over this last couple of days. He's locked in now. Tank Bigsby's gone, traded to the Eagles. Travis Etienne should have a lot of value moving forward as a high-end RB2. I think LaQuint Allen and Bayshal Tootin are going to be backups in this scenario, obviously fighting for that RB2 role. And then if you're looking for a spot start at tight end, I think Brenton Strange is worth a look this week as the spot start, depending on who your tight end is. Like if you're looking for, if you had George Kittle and you're looking for a start, like Brenton Strange is somebody I would play over like a Colston Loveland, over Mason Taylor, who's banged up right now. Over some of those lower end options, I think Brenton Strange will be a top 15 option for me at tight end this week. And then as far as the Cincinnati side, it's business as usual for Cincinnati. We got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. You're firing them all up. I don't care if the offense, especially like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, like, do you start these guys? Yes, you start T. Higgins. I don't care what your lineup looks like. T. Higgins is a top 15 play on a weekly basis, especially going up against this Jacksonville defense who did well last week, but it was against Carolina. Like, it was against the Carolina Panthers. So for me, I am bumping up all the Cincinnati. Like, they're all favorable options. DFS, you want to get Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, all great options this week. All right, moving on. New York and Dallas. So we got the Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. A little bit of confusion there at the top. Who's going to be the starter, Russell Wilson or Jackson Dart, based on Russell Wilson's play last week? They've already come out and said Russell Wilson's going to start, but Jackson Dart, a name in super flex leagues, I'd want to keep an eye on, maybe even, be a little proactive and pick up. But when it comes to this offense, I'm not really optimistic. So I think Russ will be better against Dallas. We saw what Jalen Hurts did last week against him, use his legs, took a lot of the short stuff. So Russ will have to be better in that aspect. He will have to kind of rein things in and not just take the deep shots downfield. It feels like Dallas is trying to keep things close, closer to the line of scrimmage, which is fine. But Russ is known to use his legs. Could be in a nice little bounce back spot here. I think a lot of the week one stuff applies to him as well. I don't think he's a great QB2 start, but I do think he should have a bounce back effort. As far as Malik Neighbors, he was a little banged up coming into this week, so just kind of monitor in case anything comes up with Malik Neighbors. He should be good to go. But I also think we got to temper expectations when it comes to Malik Neighbors. In a tough matchup, you got Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs on the other side. So just know to kind of temper expectations. We saw what they did to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith last week. I think Neighbors will be better than that, but just know, I think the ceiling might be a little bit limited. When it comes to these running backs for the New York Giants, Tyrone Tracy obviously could be better, and Cam Scatterboo, a lot of hard punishing runs, but finished with negative yardage. So at what point is one of these guys going to be good? I don't know. And I don't know that I would trust either one of these running backs given their circumstance. So for me, I'm kind of out on both of these running backs. I thought I was going to like Tyrone Tracy a little bit more. Maybe if we can see something a little splash this week. I think if I was going to pick either back, I'd rather have Tracy, and it's not by much. I just don't think Cam Scatterboo is going to be able to ever take over this backfield. It'll probably always be a split. If anything, it wouldn't surprise me to see Devin Singletary get more involved at some point if that's the case. For now, continue to have Tyrone Tracy as like an RB4, a flex option that I wouldn't want to start. And Cam Scatterboo right now is bench, maybe even waivers right now. Then as far as the Dallas side, Dallas will be much better. They'll be much better. And it starts with the quarterback position, Dak Prescott, who would have had a better day if CeeDee Lamb would have caught a ball. Like there's a lot of things that could have happened in that game that Dak would have played better. It's just for fantasy, it didn't turn out the way that we wanted. So I think when it comes to Dak Prescott, continue to trust him as a top end, a high end, let's call it a high end QB2 for now, but he's still a back end QB1 in my eyes. And then as far as the passing game, CeeDee Lamb, continue to fire him up as a high end wide receiver 1. But George Pickens is the player that a lot of people have concern about. And George Pickens is a wide receiver 2. This is what wide receivers twos do, just like T. Higgins. They have good games, they have bad games. And their bad games sometimes look like, does it just happen to happen in week 1? So I am good with George Pickens if you want to start him as a high upside wide receiver 3. This should be a good matchup for him to take advantage of. We saw, last week, Deebo Samuel had a good week as the wide receiver 2 for the Commanders. So I think George Pickens in a good spot. He plays a different role than Deebo, but does carry some upside. I think they look to get him right this week. And as far as the running back here, Javonte Williams is obviously one of those players who kind of surprised last week, got 2 touchdowns. but he wasn't the most efficient. I know it was a tough matchup against Philly, but it wasn't like he was hyper efficient. It was just he got the 2 touchdowns, and so it made his day look a little bit better. And then when you have Miles Sanders, who did look, somewhat more explosive at times, I think Miles Sanders is carving out a role for himself, minus the fumble. Miles Sanders is probably going to be a part of this running game. So when it comes to both of these backs, continue to trust Javonte as like a flex, maybe an RB2 for right now. But if you see anything other than that, if you see Miles Sanders start to take a little bit more work, that might be time to say, hey, what can I get for Javonte Williams in trades? To be honest, I'd probably be looking at that right now. What can I get for Javonte Williams in trades right now? That's what I'd be looking for. So, and then as far as tight end, Jake Ferguson's going to continue to be an up and down tight end too. Somebody that's pretty touchdown dependent, just like we saw last week, 4 catches for 50 yards, 4 catches, 40 yards. That's kind of his role in this thing, is to catch touchdowns. So the matchup's a neutral matchup, and I don't really expect more. He's a high-end tight end too that is touchdown dependent. Moving on. Chicago and Detroit, nice division game here. Detroit favored by 6 points in this one. The opening line was 47.5 points on the board. So high-scoring matchup, indoor matchup here. And when it comes to this is going to be a revenge game for Ben Johnson. So we'll probably see some new wrinkles out of this offense. I think Detroit's probably going to be fired up for this one as well, that Ben Johnson left. And probably look to show that, hey, on offense, it wasn't just Ben Johnson. So I think for me, what I'm looking at is, in this matchup, what does Caleb Williams look like? The first half Caleb Williams, where he's playing it safe, kind of checking things down? Or is it more the second half Caleb Williams, which was a little bit more erratic when pressure started to get in there, missing on some throws that we typically see him make? So I think when it comes to Caleb Williams in fantasy, we're going to get an up and down player, which is fine. I think you just got to be able to take the good with the bad with him as a QB2. I talked about that this offseason. But as far as his passing game goes, it looks like Rome is the guy that you want to have on a weekly basis. DJ Moore is heavily involved as well. We saw him use them as running back as well and just kind of missed a touchdown in the game. But I do think that Rome is the guy you want to have in this offense. So Luther Burden was the first-round pick. He wasn't heavily involved, only had 1 catch. You also had, a lot of Zacchaeus who came in there. He was targeted as well. But this, to me, looks like a clear 1 Rome, 1B, DJ Moore. Both of these guys profile as like wide receiver 3s to me instead of like high-end wide receiver 2s for now. And the one I'd want to start is Rome. I think he's going to be more consistent on a weekly basis. And then as far as just the offense in general, like I said, it's going to be some peaks and valleys, but I do expect this game to be a good game for this passing attack, for Caleb Williams, for Rome Odunze. So fire them both up as starts this week. Caleb's more of a high-end QB2, and Rome is going to be more of a high-end wide receiver 3, back-end wide receiver 2. DJ Moore is more of a wide receiver 3, just locked in. I think he's a little bit more volatile, going to need a touchdown. And then as far as the running backs, DeAndre Swift obviously is going to be an RB2 every single week in and week out. And in this matchup against Detroit, he's probably going to need to rely on some pass-catching work because Detroit has one of the best front fours that there is. And, we kind of saw DeAndre Swift be mid last week. I think that's what we can expect even this week. Some involvement in the passing game, probably not a lot of home run hitting. But this is also a revenge game for DeAndre Swift. Remember, he played for Detroit. So even though last week we didn't see him hit the 75 total yard marker that we want to see our running backs hit, I do think this is a decent play as a running back too, not a high upside running back too. Like he's a floor-based running back too, just based on the usage. You're probably going to need a touchdown in order for him to be valid. And then as far as tight end on Chicago, a lot of questions about Colston Loveland. This offseason, I talked about Colston Loveland being more tight end 2-ish than tight end 1 where you drafted him. And I think we kind of saw the reason for that. This offense is going to be already kind of sporadic, but it goes through Rome, it goes through DJ Moore, it goes through the ground game. Colston Loveland does get used as a blocker. He does, run routes as well, but we also seen Cole Kmet running routes and being used as a pass catcher. So I wouldn't really want any tight end out of this scenario. I think Colston Loveland will have a role. I think Cole Kmet will have a role, but both are more tight end 2 than they are tight end 1. I don't think either of these pass catchers is going to be a tight end 1 for the foreseeable future. So for me, I'm out on both Colston Loveland as a start this week. If you want to drop him, feel free. And I would not pick up Cole Kmet either. As far as the Detroit side, Jared Goff is a start this week, a rock-solid start, QB2. And he's going up against a tough Chicago defense. We saw J.J. McCarthy play well against them in the second half, but this blitzing scheme does do numbers against him, and he didn't really play well last week. Jared Goff against, I would say, a really good defense in the Green Bay Packers. So just be careful with Jared Goff. He typically plays a little bit better at home. That's why I'm more optimistic. And I think they try some things that they weren't able to execute last week against the Bears. So Jared Goff is a mid-tier QB2. I do think he has a little bit of potential here, but there's also some risk that this offense just isn't the same under Ben Johnson. That's the risk you're going to take. So when Jared Goff's normally a floor play, I actually think he's going to be kind of risk-reward this week as a QB2. As far as Amon-Ra St. Brown, go ahead and fire him up. Chicago is really good against the receiver position. They have been over the last couple of years, and we've seen them kind of even play well against Justin Jefferson on Monday night. So just be careful. I don't think a big ceiling game is here for Amon-Ra St. Brown, but hopefully there's good volume here, and I think they will take some plays, some chances with J-Mo that they weren't able to get done with the Green Bay Packers last week. J-Mo is a little bit more risk-reward, wide receiver 3. Amon-Ra St. Brown still locked in as a back-end wide receiver 1 for me this week. As far as Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, continue to trust him. I think this is a really good bounce back spot for Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, if I think there's a guy that can finish top 3 at the position, potentially even RB1 this week, I really like what Jahmyr Gibbs brings to the table. And, what's funny is that they got David Montgomery even more involved. Like, he played 80% of the snaps, so they were using both backs. It's just Jahmyr Gibbs saw a lot of passing game work. So I trust him because he has that floor with the passing game work, and if he does get a score, it's probably going to be a 25-plus point day. So Jahmyr Gibbs locked and loaded as a high-end RB1. David Montgomery is on the flex radar. Prefer not to start him until we see a little bit more success with him. But being on the field is a good thing. He was on the field, like I said, over 80% of the snaps against the Packers. And then Sam Laporta is going to be a mid-tier to back-end tight end 1 going up against the Chicago defense. I think it's just if you drafted Laporta as a top 5 tight end, he's probably not going to be that. But I do think Laporta serves as like a startable tight end on a week-to-week basis. Decent game last week. Probably what we're going to see a lot of mid-tier performance when it comes to Sam Laporta, unfortunately, if you drafted him. But I do think he's still locked and loaded as an every week tight end 1. All right, Rams and Tennessee. Anybody ask questions? I'm going to get to questions at the end. If you ask the question, I will get to you. Sorry. I'll get to you at the end, all right? If you ask a question here, TikTok too, and YouTube, I'll get to questions at the end. All right. The Rams in Tennessee. So from the Rams side of it, we saw Puka Nacua show last week in the passing game. It's going to continue to be that. I might have been a little too optimistic with Devontae Adams, and I can admit that. I think I was trying to push him into the wide receiver 1 tier, and I think I want to see it first. I'm not saying it can't happen. I do want to see it now. For my rankings purposes and matchup purposes, I am going to put him in the wide receiver 2s, probably in the mid-tier to back-end wide receiver 2s, until we see something more. He did make a couple plays. It's just he wasn't as involved as I'd want to see. And then when it comes to Stafford, I think we know he's kind of a floor-based QB2, back-end QB2. Just not a whole lot of upside, especially in this matchup. Tennessee is 5.5-point dogs, so the Rams are favored by 5.5, and it's only 42 points on the board. So a lower scoring game in general. We kind of saw with the Broncos last week. The Tennessee defense will step up, but it's just there's not going to be a whole lot of points available on both sides, in my opinion, in this game. So I think Nacua is still fire him up as a wide receiver 1. Plenty of targets last week. I'd be a little bit more concerned about Devontae Adams' ceiling. Just lower him down a little bit in that aspect. And as far as Kyron Williams going up against this Tennessee defense, this Tennessee defense was actually doing really good against J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey to start the game. It's just towards the end of it, gave up the touchdown late to J.K. Dobbins, and we saw R.J. Harvey peel off the long run as well. So I think Kyron is still a very safe back-end RB1. It's just limited ceiling. This Tennessee defense is better than their performance last week, in my opinion. So I still do like Kyron as a back-end RB1. I'm just tempering expectations when it comes to his performance. He performed well against the Texans last week, so I would expect a lot of the same here. And then on the Tennessee side of things, Cam Ward didn't perform well fantasy-wise, but the tape was really good in my opinion. Like just seeing some of the off-platform throws he was making, using his legs a lot more than it was anticipated. I think there's some growth that needs to happen there. And there's also got to be better play when it comes to his receivers. Calvin Ridley he came out and said, he had a couple bad drops. I think that needs to be better. But this game has like competitive potential. I don't think this is just going to be a Rams blowout in Tennessee. And so I think Cam Ward still, right now in most redraft leagues, single QB leagues, you can probably drop him. There's probably better options out there. But it wouldn't be surprising at some point to see this thing click. As far as Calvin Ridley goes, not the best matchup for him overall, but I think this is a good bounce back spot for him. A lot to prove for Calvin Ridley that last week was just an anomaly and that he can bounce back. So I think Calvin Ridley looks the part this week. I got him as a back-end wide receiver too. And then as far as Tony Pollard, not a great week for him against the Denver Broncos last week as well. And this Rams front definitely has improved over the years. So a tough spot for Tony Pollard. I would continue to trust him as a back-end RB2, touchdown-based, probably not high ceiling, but a floor-based RB2 in this matchup. Moving on to the Patriots and Dolphins. Patriots and Dolphins. Am I missing anybody? Oh, we're all good right now. Moving on to Patriots and Dolphins. Another division game here. And, the Raiders and Patriots game, we saw Geno Smith kind of throw his way. He had his way with this secondary and obviously threw for a ton of yards last week. And I don't know if Tua does the same thing here, but on the New England side, Drake May, I think this is one of those games where we see him use his legs. We continue to see Drake May as a high floor play, but we'll test the limits of the ceiling, I think, on a week-to-week basis. I think it's just going to be a little inconsistent, and it has to do a lot with this receiving core. So there will be games where Drake May has spike games when it comes to rushing the football, rushing scores. But when your receivers are Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, Pop Douglas, Kyle Williams, he just doesn't offer a whole lot there in the passing game. So for me, Drake May is probably going to be rated as like a high-end QB2 most weeks. And I think if I was looking for upside, he's a decent play, not a great play. Like he's not Justin Fields, and he doesn't have a floor of like Dak, in my opinion. I think he's kind of in that next tier. So back-end QB1, high-end QB2, I think he has potential for that for like a top 5 to 7 week any week. But for now, I want to keep Drake May in like probably more high-end QB2 than back-end QB1 until we see a little bit more growth on the passing side. This is a really good spot for him. We saw what Daniel Jones did last week, so I think there is upside this week. I didn't get to that point. I think there's upside. I am kind of concerned about this receiving core. I think he's going to have to use his legs in order to really maximize his potential this week, especially because I think the Dolphins bounce back offensively. And then as far as the receivers go, Stephon Diggs was decent. You know what I'm saying? I think for our fantasy teams, he's probably like a wide receiver 3, low ceiling wide receiver 3. We saw Pop Douglas catch a touchdown, but not much else outside of that. So he's kind of like a low ceiling flex play. And, I'm just not excited about any of these Patriots receivers. I know Kayshon Boutte had a strong day, but to me, I think it's probably going to be more sporadic than we want. Tough to trust on a weekly basis. And that's okay. It's just, you probably have better options until we get to somebody who's either more consistent and always there, or we get to a point where one of these guys, we get to a point where it's bye weeks and we have to trust one of these players. I think for now, I'd err on the side of caution and leave most of them on benches except for Stephon Diggs. Maybe Kayshon Boutte's a flex. Maybe Pop Douglas is a flex in your deeper leagues. For now, I'm off both. And then as far as the running backs, Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Diggs, rough game for both. I'm not sure what to think of this backfield. I think at some point we will get Travion Henderson in a bigger role. But for now, I think it's going to be a split backfield. We saw Antonio Gibson have a catch. So for me, I'm not really intrigued at all with this run game. I think Stevenson is a flex, and we got Travion Henderson, who's probably more high upside RB3. I would want to keep him out of lineups. It sucks because you drafted him in the third, fourth round, right? You drafted him for the upside, but that upside is also later in the year. So if I had a Travis Etienne, I'm playing Travis Etienne over Travion Henderson. If I had a DeAndre Swift, I'm playing DeAndre Swift over Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson's going to have to show me before I truly trust him over some of the players that I know can give me fantasy points on a week-in, week-out basis. Once he does that, we can start to put him in the RB2 tier. But until then, let him show you it. And I think Ramondre Stevenson's probably on a shorter leash than, than the people who drafted him wanted, but he's on a short leash. And then as far as the Miami side, if you have Tua Tagovailoa, what are you doing with him? I thought there was upside for him. He looked bad last week in a matchup where he had, was it two picks and a fumble. So it just looked bad on tape. And it's just sometimes we get the visual of it. We see Tyreek Hill frustrated on the sideline. There was already all the offseason stuff with this team. I think it's still 1 week. Still just 1 week. Okay? I do believe that Tua will play better this week. I don't want to start him. I do believe Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will both be much better this week. Much better. Like Tua threw for 150 yards last week. I think we see closer to the 250 and 2 that we're used to seeing out of Tua. That means Tyreek Hill will splash. That means Devon Achane will be better. This offense will move better. It just looks like it's all falling apart. So that's the only concern. It's a higher risk. I'm starting Tyreek Hill as a wide receiver 1. I am comfortable with Jalen Waddle still as a high-end wide receiver 3, back-end wide receiver 2. Still comfortable with this entire offense. I just have some concern. Now, if next week comes and we got a whole different argument, then we can talk. But I think for this matchup specifically, I'm good with Tyreek Hill. I am good with Jalen Waddle. As far as Devon Achane, fire him up. Elite RB1 still. I think the passing game will, the passing work will be there this week as well. I think this entire offense gets cracking with Tua. So no concerns for the most part. I feel really good about a bounce back effort from the Miami offense. San Francisco, New Orleans. When it comes to San Francisco, we don't know who the quarterback is going to be. Right now, it looks like Brock Purdy is going to be out, as I mentioned as it's at the top of the show. There is a high probability Mac Jones is going to be the starter. So that doesn't really change a lot fantasy-wise for me. Now, real football, maybe it changes a little bit. And I'm assuming this line is going to change. Right now, the Niners are favored by 4.5 points going into New Orleans. 43 points on the board. I'm assuming that total probably comes down a little bit with the Brock Purdy news, if he's announced out. In the meantime, Mac Jones, if you need a desperation play, super flex, go and pick him up. He was valuable last year as the Jags starter, had a little bit of value down the stretch. So I don't think it's worth leaving him on waivers and just kind of ignoring that. I think especially if you had Brock Purdy in a super flex league, you got to go pick up Mac Jones. Ricky Pearsall. All right, Ricky Pearsall played really well last week. And I think in this game against New Orleans, I would still be expecting him to have a strong performance even with Mac Jones. Last year, Mac Jones made Brian Thomas like a top 5 receiver damn near every week. So Mac Jones in this offense as well, like this is a good offense for him to be a part of. I think Mac Jones will play well, and that will provide value for Ricky Pearsall. Juwan Jennings is banged up. Not sure he is available for this game. But I'm not concerned at all about Ricky Pearsall's value. He's a high-end wide receiver 3, back-end wide receiver 2 for this matchup. Christian McCaffrey gets a bump up. I would expect a little bit more in the passing game from him, probably a little bit more even in the run game from him. So Christian McCaffrey, elite RB, top 5 RB play for me this week. And then Brian Robinson, just on the back end of that, a lot of questions about if you should hold him or not. He looks like he's in a complementary role. So you're holding as a handcuff or as a bye-week flex. You're not holding him so you can play him as an RB3. So if you have somebody else that offers a little bit more upside, go ahead and drop Brian Robinson. If you want to hold because you think Christian McCaffrey's banged up with the calf or you're expecting more work in the second half, feel free. Like, he's not a terrible hold. He's just not – he wasn't as heavily involved as you'd want to see if you're holding him for fantasy purposes. Could that change? Yes, I think that could change in the future. For now, I would say – drop him if there's somebody better, and if not, if there's not somebody better out there, it's okay to hold him. As far as George Kittle, he is on IR, will be out at least 4 weeks. It looks like 4 to 5 weeks, dealing with the hamstring injury he suffered against the Seahawks. So right now, there's a couple of options out there that I like. Brenton Strange, I talked about him at the top of the show. And then I'm going to be talking about Juwan Johnson here very shortly. I think Juwan Johnson is also a nice buy, 4 to 5 week replacement if you're looking for somebody for George Kittle. If Kyle Pitts is out there, I know waivers already happened, but if Kyle Pitts is out there, he's another play. Those are kind of the rip and replace options that I see available in most leagues, at least coming into waivers. As far as New Orleans goes, Spencer Rattler, he didn't play incredible, but he looked the part as being able to move this offense downfield. Threw a couple hospital balls to Chris Olave, which has me concerned, but I think Spencer Rattler should be enough to move this offense in general for those Alvin Kamara owners, for the Chris Olave owners. So I think Spencer Rattler is probably the right option. At some point, we might see Tyler Shook, but for now, I think he's enough to kind of hold everybody's value afloat. And so obviously you fire up Alvin Kamara, rock solid start for me this week, RB1, even going up against this Niner front. But Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, their value is probably going to fluctuate a lot this season, especially if Chris Olave can't stay on the field. So he's got to be able to stay on the field, stay healthy. But I think for me, Chris Olave is going to be a very volatile wide receiver 3 most weeks. And then Rashid Shaheed is going to be a very volatile flex. A lot of boom or bust potential. And this week against the Niners isn't the right week to start Rashid Shaheed. I think Chris Olave is a very risky start this week as a wide receiver 3. Very boom or bust, as I mentioned. And then as far as tight end goes, you can pick up Juwan Johnson. The Niners typically play well against tight ends, so I wouldn't expect a big spike week this week, but the volume should be there. He had 11 targets last week. So I don't know if that kind of volume will be there, but if the Saints are playing from behind or this game is close, you can't expect Juwan Johnson to get a lot of the check down volume to keep the chains moving. So good with Juwan Johnson, starting him this week if you're in dire straits and you need a tight end for the week. He is a high-end tight end too. High-end tight end too. Buffalo and New York. So the Bills are going into New York to play the Jets. The Bills in a thriller came back against the Ravens, and then the Jets in a thriller against the Steelers. This is going to be a better matchup. Division game here. Both teams know each other pretty well. Bills are favored by 6.5, 45 points on the board. So when it comes to the Bills side, this Jets defense is tough, even though they didn't show it last week against the Steelers. But it doesn't matter. Elite option with Josh Allen here. He should still be a high-end QB1, the potential for the QB1, excuse me. And then when it comes to Keon Coleman, you're going to fire him up this week as a wide receiver 3. Tough matchup on the other side with Sauce Gardner. He can prove it to you one more week. A lot of talk about Keon Coleman. Now that he had the good game, I could see a little bit of regression. He did catch that touchdown. It was a tip drill. Caught that in the end zone. That made his day look a lot better than it was at the end of the first half. So with Keon Coleman, I still temper my expectations. He's still a wide receiver 3 for me. He can prove me wrong very easily in this game if he has another strong showing. And I like Keon Coleman. You guys know that. But I think for this week specifically, keep him in the wide receiver 3 realm. As far as Khalil Shakir, he's more of a flex, has upside in this matchup in case Sauce does stick to Keon Coleman a little bit. And then as far as Joshua Palmer, he's more of a dart throw in 16-team leagues. James Cook dealing with a little bit of an injury this week, so just monitor his status. He's a little banged up heading into the week. Still would treat him as a high-end RB2, back-end RB1, more back-end RB1 than high-end RB2. And just know if he is banged up, Ray Davis, we may see a little bit more of him this week. But for now, James Cook is the player running back. And then Dalton Kincaid had a good showing last week, 4 catches, had a touchdown. So in this matchup, it looks like he's going to be, even though it was only 4 targets, it looks like it's going to be a little bit more Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman than it has in the past. Like last year was mostly Khalil Shakir and James Cook. So we are seeing this offense kind of change as far as the passing game. So feel free to fire up Dalton Kincaid as a high-end tight end 2. I think he's going to have back-end tight end 1 potential as the season goes on. For now, I do trust him as a high-end tight end 2, especially in this matchup against the Jets. Last week we saw Johnny Smith get a touchdown. We saw Pat Frymuth had a couple catches. So Jets defense, they have an incredible secondary. In order to move the ball, we're probably going to need to see a couple things, a little closer to the line of scrimmage where we can see Dalton Kincaid win. As far as the Jets side of the ball, Justin Fields, I don't know what else he has to prove to you. He's a locked-in QB1. Even I had some tempered expectations with him last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. No, that's not the case. Justin Fields is an elite QB1 on a weekly basis. Looked poised in the pocket, used his legs. Trust Justin Fields. So if you had any concerns about that, this matchup, 45 points on the board here. Trust Justin Fields. Look the part. Garrett Wilson, same thing. Even in tough matchups, it looks like Justin Fields is going to be able to carry that value. He is the one receiver that has value on this team. Continue to trust him as a back-end wide receiver one. Breece Hall. We saw Derrick Henry carve up this defense last week, and I think Breece Hall continues to have a strong showing. Like, he is more RB1 than RB2, and I think a lot of people were quick to put Breece Hall's value in the grave. That ain't where he belongs. Breece Hall belongs in starting lineups as a high-end RB1, and we didn't see as much Braylon Allen as we thought we were going to see last week. I thought it was kind of a surprise for me, too. I thought we would see more Braylon Allen. It didn't happen. Breece Hall is the guy. So moving forward on this Jets team, it is Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, matchup proof, start them until further notice. Especially in this game against the Bills, they're going to need all three of those guys. So would it be surprising to see Braylon Allen get a little bit more involved? But for now, that's the way I'm playing it. Seattle and Pittsburgh. How y'all doing? This is good info right now? Good info? And then hopefully over the next week or two, once we get a little bit more clarity on offenses, we get a little bit more clarity on defenses, not just one game sample size, we can dive in a little bit more into the specific matchups and how much it really applies. For now, I just want to kind of keep things a little bit more fluid and talk more value, if I would start them, if I wouldn't, where I think their trade value is, just so you guys know that's where my head is, instead of going like matchup base or, I think we don't have enough information yet to fully go like, oh, no, I can't trust this player. I think it's going to take at least another week or two. Actually, let me take a quick – am I halfway through the slate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm halfway through the slate. Let me get to a couple questions that came in. Real quick. Ridley, Tyreek, Olave, Henderson, pick 2. I'm going Tyreek and Ridley. Tyreek and Ridley there. And then the other one was – I missed the other one. Tyreek and Ridley. And then over here – what's up, fam? You doing starts and sits? Not today. I'm just really going over the games today. I will do some questions at the end. Especially start and sits. If you ask me a start and sit question, I'm probably going to skip over it as I'm going through. Diego, what's good, bro? What's good? Hope all is well. Appreciate you, my man. Appreciate you, Jorge. Trade Pearsall for Worthy? No, I'd rather have Worthy. I feel like that's Devontae for Worthy, Pearsall for Worthy. I think I'd rather have Worthy. The only thing is we just don't know the timeline. So I think Pearsall's a good move for Worthy. I don't think Devontae Smith is. I think Devontae Smith bounces back and you'll be able to get way more for him after this week. I think Pearsall's the right value. Like high-end wide receiver 3. Not sure if you'll start him every week. Once Brandon Ayuk comes back, what's this look like? Once Brock Purdy is out, what does it look like? You eliminate a lot of questions and you bring on Worthy if you feel like you have a team that can sustain without Pearsall. Like if you didn't need to start him, get Worthy. I think Devontae Smith is it's a little high for Worthy right now. A little high. Should I drop Rachaad White for Miles Sanders? I still trust Rachaad White a little bit more. Miles Sanders is more wait and see. What's your trust in Hawkinson? Seems like he was being used more as a blocker. I have a lot of concern about Hawkinson. I'm hoping it was like because that D line for Chicago is tough. I'm hoping that was the case and they just kept him in a little bit more. But I mean, he had 4 catches, just not elite tight end usage, which is what we wanted. We wanted like top 3 tight end. It's just I don't know that we get that. Is Jaden Blue droppable? Yes. I don't really see a need to hold him. I don't really see it. All right, Seattle and Pittsburgh. Let's get to it. Seattle and Pittsburgh. So one of the lower scoring matchups of the week, we got the Seahawks and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's favored by 3 in this game, 40.5 points on the board. So on the Seahawks side, we saw Sam Darnold throw for around 150 yards last week. Not really inspiring, but this Pittsburgh defense gave up a lot of yardage to Justin Fields. I think I would expect this Pittsburgh defense, which is probably a top 3 defense in the league, to look more like that this week at home against the Seahawks. And then as far as JSN, like it was over 50% target share. There's no way in hell that's sustainable at all. So when it comes to JSN, like just, you can treat him as a high-end wide receiver 2, back-end wide receiver 1 if you want. I think he's more high-end wide receiver 2 until we see this offense throw a little bit more touchdowns. We see a little bit more of like what this offense really looks like. This Steeler team has good corners. So I don't know that we see the same game from JSN. I am tempering expectations, putting him in as a wide receiver 2 for this week. As far as Cooper Kupp, definitely some concerns on the Cooper Kupp side, especially because I thought he would be in a really good bounce back spot. Only had 3 targets last week. So I am concerned about the usage, want to see what it looks like with a full set of like yardage from Darnold. Because if this is what it looks like on a weekly basis with Darnold, I'd be concerned about JSN and Cooper Kupp. I wouldn't want to start Cooper Kupp this week. I'd want him to prove it, especially against a tough Pittsburgh secondary. So for me, out on Cooper Kupp right now, bench option, you probably have somebody better until we see it out of Cooper Kupp. It's not a panic. It's more so let's wait and see. As far as the running backs, this is probably the biggest question that I'm going to, that I've been getting in the lives is like, what do you do with Kenneth Walker? What do you do with Kenneth Walker? I think Kenneth Walker is a wait and see. And I wouldn't be in a rush to go buy Kenneth Walker, but I damn sure am not in a rush to sell Kenneth Walker. If I had to pick one, I would probably buy before I sold. I think it's a lot of panic right now. Zach Charbonnet did look like the better running back and kind of has throughout the preseason. But Kenneth Walker was also dealing with an injury this preseason, so this could have been one of those things where you get him game. Like he didn't have a lot of practice time, didn't have any preseason reps. So you want to get him involved and kind of work him in as well. This is a tougher matchup against a Pittsburgh defense, so I could see this being another timeshare type thing. But we also saw Breece Hall have a strong game last week against this Pittsburgh defense through his volume in the passing game, which is where we could see Kenneth Walker win. So I don't know that I would call it a full buy right now. I would start Kenneth Walker as an RB2. Just remember, your running back ones are locked and loaded. We should expect high floor games from them. But with your RB2s, we do get some varied production. And I think that's kind of why I had Kenneth Walker as more of an RB2. And I started to sour on him a little bit, especially once we got towards draft season. On the Pittsburgh side of things, for those who called Aaron Rodgers washed, I think he proved that he's not that. And so going up against the Seattle secondary, which is good, but it was tested last week at times by the Niners. We saw Ricky Pearsall really test them. It looks like Aaron Rodgers is going to use all parts of this offense, and the arm is there. So for me, I trust Aaron Rodgers as a back-end QB2, especially in this matchup. I think he doesn't have the ceiling of some of the rushing quarterbacks, but I do think he has like a 252 touchdown type floor, which is what we love from our QB2s. Like in your super flex leagues, or even if you're looking in dire, like I'm just not expecting the 4 touchdown performance we saw from him last week every week. But shit, he has that ceiling. Especially when DK Metcalf there. You have Calvin Austin, who's the wide receiver 2 from this team, and is a strong, I would say he's a good pickup right now, a good upside pickup on a weekly basis. So Calvin Austin, a deep threat, and Aaron Rodgers will take chances downfield. I don't think he's the worst pickup in the world in 12-team leagues. So Calvin Austin, a name to actually pick up. Ben Skoranek also had a touchdown. I'm not really concerned about him. But Calvin Austin deserves to be on rosters for just purely the upside. And then as far as the ground game, it was weird to see Kenny Gainwell kind of lead this backfield as far as touches, especially after Jaylen Warren got paid. So I'm watching this backfield to see what it is. I think Jaylen Warren has a bounce-back game against Seattle. I'm not sure why the usage was that, because Kenny Gainwell wasn't really super effective on his touches. But Caleb Johnson is a very distant third in this pecking order until maybe middle of the year. But Kenny Gainwell, I'm not picking him up at all. It's just maybe he's going to be more of a nuisance. This looks like it might be a 2-headed monster as far as the running back room, maybe riding the hot hand or whoever's doing things well. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, why Kenny Gainwell was getting more work in this game than Jaylen Warren. So I would like to think Jaylen Warren does get more work in this game. I would still trust him as a high-end RB3, back-end RB2. As far as the tight ends go, This seems like a plus spot as well. Like we saw George Kittle really getting off to a strong start against Seattle before his injury. So Jonnu Smith, who caught a touchdown, only had 15 yards last week. I think Jonnu Smith is in for a bounce back in this game. And I think he could be a nice high-end tight. I think everybody was too far down on Jonnu. And I think he bounces back in this game and has a decent game. But like, I think if you had him as a tight end too, or he's available as a free agent in your league right now, especially for those who had Colston Loveland, for those who had, a tight end that disappointed, like feel good about starting Jonnu as a top 15 option for me, probably on a weekly basis from here on out, especially seeing the way Aaron Rodgers is throwing the football. Cleveland and Baltimore, division game. Baltimore's favored by 10.5. 45 points on the board here. So decent scoring here on the agenda. On the Cleveland side, we saw Joe Flacco throw for over 40 times last week, which resulted in a ton of passing game volume for all the pass catchers. I think if this is a trend, I think we see a little bit more of this. We saw Josh Allen kind of have his way with this Baltimore secondary last week. So I don't know that happens every week. Baltimore's home opener. But I do think we get Joe Flacco as, a floor-based QB2, which, that's the best that we're ever going to rank Joe Flacco. That's this in this matchup. As far as Jerry Jeudy, had a couple bad drops. He didn't look the part as well, but Cedric Tillman did show up. So how I would rank both of these receivers. Jerry Jeudy to me coming into the week is going to be a high-end wide receiver 3, but like really volatile. I don't know that he bounces back because it looks like there's multiple pass catchers on this offense that Joe Flacco will trust. Cedric Tillman, he had nine targets. You had Harold Fannin had 9 targets. You had 8 catches, 8 targets from Dylan Sampson. So a lot of volume being spread out, and I think Joe Flacco is the type of quarterback to just throw to whoever's open. So Jerry Jeudy, high-end wide receiver 3 with volatility. Cedric Tillman on the flex radar with potential for more than that. I think he's an upside flex because of the touchdown potential. So both of them aren't must starts. I think Jerry Jeudy I would still rather start until we see a clear changing of the guard at receiver. Right now, 1A, 1B with Jerry Jeudy and Tillman. And we saw this from Tillman in the second half of last year. Don't forget that. As far as the running backs go, we could get Quinshon Judkins. He didn't go to practice today, but we could get him this week. I think he has to get cleared. There's probably some other stuff with the league. But if that does happen, it will make this a mixed bag at the running back position. I'd want to be proactive and pick him up if he was available for whatever reason. In your more shallow leagues, you can leave him out there. But your 12-team leagues, of course, don't leave him out there. As far as Dylan Sampson, he is on the flex radar, low ceiling flex, he needs that passing game volume. He had 8 catches, which, I'm just not sure he gets there every week. But if he's a 6 to 8 catch player on a weekly basis, he'll be a weekly, floor-based flex. For now, I think he's a little bit more risky. He's probably 5 to 6 catches most weeks. So I think you can put him as a flex. He has a good floor, 10-point floor. I just don't see a whole lot of 20-point weeks out of him this season. As far as the tight ends, David Njoku, Harold Fannin. Harold Fannin with a very strong game last week, and they've been kind of hyping him up. Both receivers or both tight ends are playing. I still think he's second in this pecking order. It was a bad game for David Njoku. I'm chalking it up. It was a great matchup for tight ends. We've seen Cincinnati get carved up by tight ends in the past. Typically, David Njoku has great games against Cincinnati, but Harold Fannin did. So I think this is more of they're deploying their options, probably going to spread things out in this offense. Flacco found a matchup that he liked. I'm not panicking yet on David Njoku. Where I could see things getting a little tricky is if this does become a Harold Fannin thing over the next 2 weeks, then it's time to panic on David Njoku. And I can also see them trading David Njoku at some point to a tight end needy team. That could even happen as soon as next week. It's just Flacco and Njoku are tight. They've been labeled as best friends, so I don't know if that happens. I think that's a part of a reason why Flacco probably came to Cleveland as well. Just interesting to note because they're going up against a team that kind of had the same thing happen to them last year with Andrews and Likely. Isaiah Likely looked the part early on, was kind of the upside play, and then as the season went on, Mark Andrews held value. As far as Baltimore goes, you fire up your normal options here. Lamar Jackson, obviously, even though he goes up against Cleveland, he's had pretty good success against Cleveland, about a 20-point, 25-point performance most of the time he plays against Cleveland, so not a lot of concern here. And then Zay Flowers, continue to fire him up as a floor-based wide receiver 2-3 is what I would call him. And then in the running back, Derrick Henry, you're going to start him. He's a high-end, top 5 running back play for me on the board this week. As far as tight end goes, if you're concerned about Mark Andrews, I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. Bad performance. Only, 2 catches last week. So I want to see a lot more from Mark Andrews, but I wouldn't be so concerned to where I would drop him or even bench him. I think he's in a good spot to bounce back. This offense went through Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry last week. It wouldn't be a surprise to see some other receivers get involved and Mark Andrews get involved this week. Moving on. Denver and Indy. I'll get to questions at the end. I'll get to them in just a little bit. I got 6 games left. Let me get them. 6 games left. All right, Denver goes into Indy after, the offense kind of struggled against the Tennessee Titans last week. So with Bo Nix, it depends on where you drafted him. If you drafted him top 8, I don't know that we see that. We probably see a little bit more erratic Bo Nix. That's just what I think. Now, he's going to be QB2 for me this week. And I think if I had other options in a game that profiles 42.5 points, profiles is a lower scoring game. They are favored in this one as well by 2 points over the Colts. I do think that we see – you just got to temper your expectations when it comes to Bo Nix. Might be without Evan Ingram this week. To me, his value is probably like this team is going to use the run game to move the football. That's why you go get a J.K. Dobbins. That's why you draft R.J. Harvey in the second round. It's going to be through the running backs. The passing game is a little limited. You have Cortland Sutton, and then you have Marvin Mims, and it's just the other options. Troy Franklin, it's just not exciting, right? So just notice it's going to be a run-first team with multiple backs being used. We saw Tyler Batty even enter the game. Bidet into the game. So I think with Bo Nix, I'm just going to kind of temper everybody's expectations. He's a QB2. Cortland Sutton, feel free to fire him up. Continue to fire him up as a wide receiver 2. And then when it comes to Marvin Mims, I'm just avoiding Marvin Mims. If you want to drop him even, I'm cool with like swapping Marvin Mims out for somebody that has a little bit more upside season long. I don't think we really see Marvin Mims be a consistent flex option throughout the year. As far as the running backs go, R.J. Harvey and J.K. Dobbins, we saw, decent games out of both of them. J.K. got the long touchdown, or got the, touchdown. R.J. Harvey with the long run. So both running backs, I think, will have value. This is going to be an annoying committee to be part of. And I still think J.K. Dobbins early on probably has more touchdowns. R.J. Harvey probably has a little bit of like a PPR floor. So I would want to avoid this backfield, like starting them, having to rely on them, both backs, until we get a little bit more clarity on the situation. For now, I think R.J. Harvey and J.K. are both RB3s, and I think J.K. is a little safer than R.J. Harvey, who had the long run that kind of saved his day fantasy-wise. I think both backs look good for what the Denver Broncos need, though. So real football, I think it applies. I think for fantasy, it's a situation I want to stay away from until we see somebody take a clear lead over the other. As far as being like RB2 worthy. If you got to start one, go right ahead. But I think if I had an option for like a stronger play, I would play them over R.J. Harvey and over J.K. Dobbins right now. Especially in this matchup, going up against Indy, they have a decent, able to slow down Devon Achane last week. So, yeah, it's just for these running backs in Denver, I'm going to kind of stay away, especially this week. And as far as Evan Ingram, we don't know his availability. Looks like he got banged up over the weekend. Got to see if he's available. He wasn't getting utilized much anyway, which was kind of surprising. I talked about this on the show, on the live yesterday. It was surprising because I thought that he would be a vital part of the offense, and they didn't utilize him as much as I thought. So if you have Evan Ingram, I would be slightly concerned. And when I talk about starting a Kyle Pitts or starting a Jonnu Smith or starting, Brenton Strange, this is the kind of player I'm talking about starting him over. Let Evan Ingram show you, even though we've been trusting him over the last couple of years he was in Jacksonville. this is a different offense. It's going to be a run-first offense in Denver. Until we see otherwise, until they get into some shootouts, and especially in this game against the Colts, this seems like a ball possession type game as indicated by the score. I'd be a little careful with with any tight end that's here, but with Evan Ingram just moving forward, I'd want to see this team get into more shootouts before I trusted him as a mid-tier to high-end tight end 1. He's more back-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2. On the Indy side, it was good to see Daniel Jones bounce back, man. And there was a lot of shit talking. Like, I even had doubts about Daniel Jones initially. And it's like, as time went on, it's like he's in a good spot. This is a talented team, decent offensive line. You got Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, good safety valves, A.D. Mitchell, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, like Tyler Warren. This supporting cast is really good for Daniel Jones. So he is a mid-tier QB2 because of the rushing upside. We saw him get in for a rushing score. Kind of took something away from Jonathan Taylor we were all expecting, right? So Daniel Jones, trust him as a mid-tier QB2 this week. Going up against the Denver defense, on paper, they're a great defense in real life. But on paper, they even look better because of what they threw at Cam Ward last week. So I think through the air, I wouldn't be expecting much. But using his legs on the ground, he provides that floor-based quarterback 2, mid-tier quarterback 2, even in a tough matchup like this one. Not a lot of points on the board, but feel free to start him in a super flex league if you need to. I wouldn't be so scared of the matchup that I didn't start him for like a Russell Wilson or for like somebody that's a little bit lower tier, like a Joe Flacco. I would start Daniel Jones ahead of some of those other QB3 type options. As far as Pittman, might be a slower day for Michael Pittman this week. Put him in the wide receiver 3 range. Still okay with starting him if you don't have a better option. Josh Downs, he will be on benches, or I'm okay with even dropping him. Could be, a decent safety valve for Josh Downs. But really where I get excited for this passing game is with Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren will have a lot of volume in this game, so he'll be a top 5 play for me this week when it comes to tight ends. As far as Jonathan Taylor was dealing with a little bit of a neck injury, if you saw he came out of the game later, we saw DJ Giddens in the middle of the third quarter and then for the rest of the game. So they said it was a preventative measure, trying to make sure that Jonathan Taylor didn't suffer more injury. Should be good to go for this week. I haven't seen anything otherwise. But Jonathan Taylor, an elite RB1 this week, a top 5 play for me at the running back position. Cardinals in Arizona. This should be a fun game. Like, I thought that last week about the Jacksonville-Carolina game. I kind of think that about this Arizona and Carolina game. I got a feeling the Panthers bounce back. You guys feel like that? You guys feel like the Carolina Panthers bounce back? It seems like a really good spot for them to bounce back against the Cardinals defense. That actually has improved a lot. But I think Bryce Young is probably still a prove-it player for me right now. He had a really strong second half last year. Looked terrible last week against the Jags. So I'd want to see things change before I put him in starting lineups, even in super flex leagues. Like I said, I would start Daniel Jones right now over Bryce Young. And to see like Troy McMillan, T-Mac, he looked Teteroa McMillan looked way better last week than I thought he would. I thought he would struggle a little bit, even though the fantasy numbers didn't say that. He looks like the clear alpha in this, and we know Xavier Legette struggled mightily last week, and I thought that was an upside player. No. Leave him on your bench. Leave Xavier Legette on your bench, and I just got to chalk that one up as an L. I don't know that we get that from him this year. I don't know that we get what we wanted out of Xavier Legette this year. So out on Xavier Legette. To Troy McMillan, Teteroa McMillan, I got to figure out how to say his name better. I try to say Ted McMillan. I get crucified by the community. So I want to say his name right. Teteroa McMillan. I think he'll be good all season long. But this team, Arizona has some good corners. But neutral matchup on paper, I think he'll be wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 3-ish, back-end wide receiver 2-ish. Maybe if you drafted him as a top 20 receiver, you're probably going to be disappointed. But I think he should be a top 30 receiver moving forward. Chuba Hubbard, continue to start him as an RB2. Nothing much really there. Rico Dowdle did not interfere at all with the workload. Surprisingly, I thought he was going to see more touches. He didn't. Continue to trust Chuba Hubbard as a high-end running back 2. Kyler Murray was sick heading into last week. Unfortunately for him, was dealing with some stuff, I guess, some stomach issues heading into last week. But will still be a top 10 play for me in this matchup. I think he has upside for a lot more, especially if Marv. I think Marv will continue to be trustworthy this week. A lot of questions on if it was real or if it was a sell high. My valuation on Marv is if you're not getting top 10 value at the receiver position, just stick with Marv. And I think this week will show that. He is a back-end wide receiver 1 for me, even in this matchup. He's probably going to see some J.C. Horn, and I think he can beat that matchup, and I think they'll try this matchup. We also will see Trey McBride, right? Trey McBride in this matchup, who's kind of a secondary receiver. This is a plus matchup for him. We saw Brenton Strange do well, and Carolina's given up a lot of yardage to tight ends over the last year. So Trey McBride, fire him up. He's an elite option. Might even be my top tight end play on the board this week. Probably is. As far as the running backs go for this game, James Conner and Trey Benson. Trey Benson, there was this 1A, 1B talk with Trey Benson. Trey Benson is the running back 2 on the scene. It's not 1A, 1B. At least he didn't show it last week. So going up against this Carolina team, Arizona they have potential to get up in this game. Could be tighter than advertised. This game could be a little tighter than advertised, but I do expect James Conner to be a top 15 running back this week. I got to see it now with Trey Benson. Got to see it. There's no way I would put Trey Benson up, with the flex or RB3s. I can't do it until I see him get more volume. So could it happen in this game? Absolutely. I think there's spike week potential here, but for now, the way I have it, I have James Conner as a high-end RB2, back-end RB1, and I have Trey Benson. Leave him on your bench until we see it. All right, moving on. Last Sunday afternoon game before we get into the primetime games here, we have Philly and KC. And so we saw Philly last week. In this game right here, it looks like it's going to be close. Philly favored by 1 in Arrowhead, which is crazy. 46.5 points on the board. So potential volume here for a lot of the key pieces. This should be, a higher offensive game. We saw Philly last week against Dallas kind of just take what the defense gave them. And I think that's a fine strategy, but I think against this KC secondary, which we saw, the Chargers really exploited this KC secondary. Obviously, we know how good Chris Jones is on that defensive line, but they took some chances against this defense, and it worked. It would not shock me to see Jalen Hurts in this Philadelphia offense do the same thing, especially because their receiving core was shut down by this Dallas defense last week. Complete duds from A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. So Jalen Hurts, elite quarterback play, but when it comes to A.J. Brown, I'm not panicking at all. Zero panic. Zero panic when it comes to Devontae Smith. There's years of evidence that this offense works with both of these guys. Devontae Smith will probably be around 1,000 yards. A.J. Brown will probably be around 1,400 yards. When it's all said and done, these guys are going to hit their numbers. No panic at all. If I could go get A.J. Brown right now, for anybody that was outside of like the top 10 range, for sure I would do that. Emeka Egbuka. You got Ricky Pearsall. There's some like names that are being thrown around in A.J. Brown deals. We've seen this before with him where he's had a slow start and he bounces back. He always puts up the same type of numbers. I would be very active in trades trying to go get A.J. Brown if I could for whoever's panicking with A.J. Brown. He's not a sell candidate by any means. Same thing for Devontae Smith. Now, he is a top 25 play still rest of the season for me. We know he's going to finish around 1,000 yards, 7-8 touchdowns. It's just who he is as a player. And his value spikes if, Dallas Goedert misses time, A.J. Brown is like, we know who Devontae Smith is. So I feel good about both of those guys. Start them both this week against KC. Saquon, automatic fire up, even up against this KC defense, which is stout against running backs. You continue to fire them up. Dallas Goedert is also a high-end tight end 2, back-end tight end 1 for me this week. Floor-based, not really a lot of ceiling there in this matchup. You kind of want a touchdown from him in order to validate like starting him, but I still would give him about 4 or 5 catches in this game. When it comes to the KC side of things, now Mahomes Mahomes going to be without some weapons. No Rashee Rice, probably no Xavier Worthy this week. Xavier Worthy is week to week right now, not expected back this week, but not going on IR. So Mahomes going to have to use his legs a little bit like he did against the Chargers last week, and his Philly defense is tough. I think Mahomes is probably going to be a tier down right now, back end QB1-ish, more so than like the high upside that he has typically shown in the past. Leaned very heavily on Hollywood Brown, who had 16 targets last week against the Chargers. So my biggest concern with Mahomes is that the ceiling isn't there, even in this matchup that has potential points. I think we can see this be more ground game focused for the Chiefs as they get their weapons back, right? Like, they've got to kind of change things. There's no way without Xavier Worthy they're going to be as explosive as they hoped. Hollywood Brown, good start this week as a wide receiver 3, volume-based wide receiver 3. You're hoping for a touchdown. Still think he's able to carve out somewhere between 8 to 10 targets. The other sneaky options on this team, Tyquan Thornton and Juju Smith. Juju Smith did not have a ton of volume last week, but he's somebody that Mahomes has trusted in the past. Tyquan Thornton saw a lot of downfield opportunities. And, even against the Dallas Cowboys, we didn't really see a whole lot of those splash plays with George Pickens. But Philly has given up downfield passing in the past. So I think Tyquan Thornton, for now, is a watch. Could have some value in deeper leagues. Juju's the other one I kind of think we might see a little bit more from him. I'm not saying to go overpay, go pick him up in like your more shallow leagues. What I'm saying is that I think Hollywood's safe. He's the one I would play as the wide receiver 3. I am very intrigued to see what happens with Juju and with Travis Kelce with Worthy out. Because last year there was a point in time when Rashee Rice was out, when Hollywood was out, Xavier Worthy was in, Juju had a strong performance and got injured. The team brought him back. And there was a couple plays during the game that made me think, if the team can get him a little bit more involved, like strategy-wise, I think there's a place for him, maybe not Rashee Rice role, but like a place for him. I've probably spent a little bit too much time on Juju Smith. Just know I'm intrigued and I'm looking at what is his value this week. I want to see, because I have a feeling we might be talking about him as like a week 3 pickup. It wouldn't be long-term value. Worthy should be back in a few weeks. Rashee Rice will be back in a few weeks. Not long-term value. Just I have a feeling that like we might be talking about him as a week 3 pickup. As far as Pacheco, a lot of concerns about Pacheco. Only had 5 carries last week, which was weird. We saw Kareem Hunt be utilized. I don't know what to think about this running back room. I was kind of excited for Pacheco, and I don't think that it's over for him. So I still trust him as an RB2 because he's been that for our fantasy teams. I would be concerned if this week against Philly, like we saw Javonte get in twice against his team. We saw Miles Sanders run wild against his team. I would be concerned if Isaiah Pacheco had like less than 12 carries, didn't get involved in the passing game. For now, I'm not really concerned about it. He's still an RB2. I wouldn't panic. Kareem Hunt, to me, is on the flex radar in deeper leagues. I'm not really interested in starting Kareem Hunt. And then Travis Kelce will be an elite tight end 1 for me this week. I would expect his volume to go up with Worthy out. He had a touchdown last week. I would just expect his volume to go up and look a little bit more like the old Travis Kelce, not the 100-yard, 2-touchdown Travis Kelce, but like start to resemble a little bit more like 6 catches, 70 yards. I think they spread it out. Like, I don't think we see 16 target Hollywood Brown, even though those are great numbers, and I think he's wide receiver 3 worthy. I just don't expect to see that on a future basis. Let's move on to the Sunday night game. Sunday night game, Atlanta versus the Vikings. So strong showing from this Atlanta team last week. Very strong showing from the Vikings on Monday Night Football. We got the Vikings favored by 5 points in this one. 45.5 points on the board for Sunday Night Football with the Vikings at home. I think this is going to be a shootout. Even though this Vikings defense is really good, and this Falcons defense has improved as well, this has shootout potential to me on Sunday night. I think we can see fireworks here. Michael Penix looked the part last week, had a couple throws that he missed, couple almost plays for him at the goal line. He dove and missed one, stepped out, and then we also had Drake London drop one. So for me, Michael Penix is going to be a top 15 play for me in this game. Might even be top 12. I got to see exactly where it shakes out with the rankings. Rankings will be up on JHN Fantasy very soon here. But Michael Penix, a top 15 play for sure for me this week, high in QB2, as I think he'll be moving forward. So if you picked up Penix thinking he was a one-week wonder, or maybe you're not sure where to value him, he should be a floor-based quarterback 2 with upside. Okay, floor-based QB2 with upside. What I mean by that is he is in the Jordan Love world to me. He is in the Dak Prescott world to me. He is in that he's going to get around 252 touchdown world, but he could also have a rushing score. He could also have 300-plus yards passing. He could also have 4 touchdowns passing. Like, that's where I value Michael Penix. So if you're wondering how I value Michael Penix or how you should value him for your team, high-end QB2, this isn't a player I would just be like, oh, he had a good week and trade off. I think this is a safe player to start on a weekly basis, and I do think he has more potential than even what we saw last week. In this matchup, he's top 15. Drake London dealing with the shoulder he suffered during the game last week against the Bucs. For now, I would still trust him in this matchup. He is expected to be on the field. And we saw Rome have, kind of a light day against this Minnesota secondary, 6 catches for 30-plus yards and a score. DJ Moore, kind of a light day. I think Drake London will be fine, though. Had a lot of volume in the game. I think it was 12, 13 targets in the game. So he's going to continue to get peppered with targets by Michael Penix, especially if Darnell Mooney is still out. Haven't seen the update on him as of yet, if he's going to be available. Even if Darnell Mooney plays, Drake London is still an elite volume-based wide receiver 1. If Mooney plays, I would err on the side of caution. Let's see what it looks like, especially since he wasn't able to hit the field last week. Bijan, enough said. Bijan Robinson, we saw the game last week, but it was interesting. It was interesting to see the way that they deployed him, because it was like they kept both backs on the field. They used Bijan a lot at receiver, and then they would bring Tyler Algier in as like he had a role. It wasn't like Tyler Algier was just this 80-20 split. Tyler Algier was on the field. So just something to note here. Curious to see if they do try to get to be like, I thought Bijan had like 2,000-yard rushing potential with close to over 500 yards receiving. But it looks more like it would be 1,000 season from Bijan. More like Christian McCaffrey, how Christian McCaffrey had 1,300 yards, 100 catches, and 1,000 yards that year. I think that is more of what Bijan's going to provide this year, as opposed to 1,800 yards rushing or 400 or 500 yards receiving. I think we see big receiving numbers from Bijan this year. So when it comes to Bijan, obviously elite, but it was just interesting to note, Tyler Algier might have some standalone value during bye weeks. I'm not banking on it, nor do I want to really play Tyler Algier, but curious to know. And then Kyle Pitts. If you got Kyle Pitts, just know he's not a guy that you can make fun of. He's not a meme. He is a serious, legit threat to be a top 12 tight end on a week-to-week basis, especially as long as Darnell Mooney's out. So Kyle Pitts, fire him up, top 12 option. Even this week, Minnesota was able to kind of stymie, Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet. I think Kyle Pitts is more receiver-based than tight end-based. I think he has they were looking his way. Penix was looking his way. So fire him up. As far as J.J. McCarthy, tale of two halves here for J.J. McCarthy, who looked like a rookie, looked like it was his first start early, and then calmed his nerves and looked elite in the second half. So I think we'll see that for a majority of the year. We're going to see a mixed bag with J.J. McCarthy, but to me, like I said, this has shootout potential. He's a mid-tier quarterback, too, with a lot of upside. A lot of upside. As far as Justin Jefferson in this matchup, we saw Mike Evans do decent, but Emeka Egbuka really shine. So I think Justin Jefferson's going to have a tough matchup there on the other side. But for me, I'm still even going up against AJ Terrell. They were playing a lot of zone last week, I noticed, against the Bucs receivers. And I think that might be the case again. So Justin Jefferson typically operates out the slot where we saw Egbuka. I think he has a strong performance this week going up against his Falcons secondary. And then as far as, TJ Hawkinson, there was some concerns from a lot of the fantasy community about TJ Hawkinson's workload last week. I didn't share those concerns. And I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, but I want to see more usage out of him. Man, it was slightly concerning to see. So when it comes to TJ Hawkinson, I got him as a mid-tier tight end 1 still. If he disappointed this week, I'd be ready to change my tone on TJ Hawkinson. For now, I keep him as a mid-tier tight end 1. Still mid-tier tight end 1. Good to see Aaron Jones get in the end zone last week on that catch, but Jordan Mason was involved and looked the part. So when you're ranking Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason this week, it was good to see Aaron Jones be as a receiver. Good to see Jordan Mason. I think he had over 70 yards rushing. Good to see both of those backs be utilized, but I would be concerned if I had Aaron Jones because if Jordan Mason stays as efficient as he was against the Bears last week, this is going to turn into Jordan Mason's backfield. I like them both as complementary pieces right now. Both of them are RB3s with upside. I think both of them have upside. With Aaron Jones having the better floor, Jordan Mason's going to need a touchdown in order to justify his range. So Jones is still the better start right now in PPR leagues. Jordan Mason is going to be a touchdown or bust RB3. And I think Aaron Jones is more back-end RB2. All right. Moving on. Monday night. Woo! Long show, y'all. Long show. Good to be back, though. Good to be back on the game-by-game stardom sit-em. So I will answer some questions here at the end after the Monday night games. Let me get some water real quick. Monday night games are going to be lit. At least that Tampa. I think that Tampa-Houston game is going to be lit. Everybody worried about the Houston line, which I guess is understandable, but we're going to see how it looks. Everybody's so quick to – why? I don't understand. I think this is a newer age thing. Sorry, I don't mean to segue here, but I don't understand why everybody panics so hard after week 1. Like, we do this every single year where week 1 players disappoint. Week 1 players don't live up to expectations. Then it's, do I drop them? Do I trade them? Not everything needs to be a reaction. I would say good rule of thumb, especially as I go on to talk about the Houston team, good rule of thumb for players is to kind of wait about 3 to 4 weeks. If you go 0-3, it's not the end of the world. You can make the playoffs. You can still win your championship going 0-3. 0-4 is a little room to panic, but by most of the time, you're going to know, okay, my team just isn't good. If you're 0-4, chances are your team just isn't good. So I think avoiding panic early on and selling pieces for players who played well in week 1 isn't always the way. Just be careful with writing off players too early. It can come back to bite you. That's my one piece. My one piece, as I go into this Tampa game, strong showing from this Tampa team last week against the Falcons. They go into Houston Monday night. Houston is 2.5-point favorites. Is that right, or do I have that backwards? Houston is 2.5-point favorites, or do I have it backwards? No, Houston 2.5-point favorites. So my reason justified. Houston 2.5-point favorites. A lot of people are probably going to be on Tampa this game. I can see Tampa plus 2.5 being smashed. This number is probably going to come down from 2.5, but if it doesn't, should let you know about Houston. But this Houston defense is an elite defense in the league, so I'd be a little cautious with Baker. I do think this is going to be a good real game. But Baker, without his, you have Ibuka who played well, you have Mike who's an elite receiver, but there, Cade Otton didn't look the part last week. We got Bucky Irving. I think this offense looked a little different at times last week against the Falcons and then kind of came on strong because Baker's just that dude. Baker is he's elite. He's an elite quarterback. We just got to call it what it is. So I think Baker is still a strong QB1. I just don't see a big ceiling from him until we start to get some of these other options back in the passing game. Godwin, McMillan. We see Cade Otton get to full strength. I think Baker's more of a floor-based QB1. As far as Mike Evans, trust him in this matchup. Mike Evans is still the receiver I would want to start in this matchup. We saw Emeka Egbuka had 4 catches, so 60 yards, 2 scores. That's great. He had 6 targets. Baker was still looking Mike's way a little bit more. I trust Emeka Egbuka, but I don't want to say he's the wide receiver 1, or if I was in a dilemma and had to only start one of them, I'm still starting Mike Evans. Okay? I don't think we've seen a changing of the guard at the receiver position. And if I could sell Emeka Egbuka at that price, I would do it. If I could sell Ibuka as a top 15 receiver, I would do it. I would value him as a wide receiver 2 moving forward. Think like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Think Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Think CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens. There's a strong wide receiver 2, and sometimes those guys have very strong weeks. I think we saw a ceiling. I hate to say it, but I think we saw a ceiling game from Emeka Ibuka last week. All right? So I know the hype was there all offseason. I know they've been talking about him. Just be careful with this Houston matchup. This defense is better than advertised and better than they played against the Rams last week. Mike Evans, clear fire up. Ibuka, clear fire up. I would prefer to play Mike Evans as a top 15 play this week. As far as Bucky Irving, continue to fire him up. He's an RB1. Cade Otton, a little concerned with him, but hopefully we can get better production out of Cade Otton in this matchup. It's a neutral matchup against Texans. They're typically pretty good against the tight end position. On Houston's side of the ball, a lot of concern about what this offense looked like against the Rams last week, and justifiably so. I think this Houston team needs to show better promise on the line, and I think the running game needs to be slightly better. Nick Chubb was decent, but it's just not the same without Joe Mixon. So, Nico Collins, a lot of concern about him, as well as CJ Stroud. I think both of these guys will be better this week against Tampa, which Tampa, their goal is to stop the run, and teams can pass a little bit better on Tampa, and that's just the nature of how this thing's set up. So I think this kind of plays into the strengths of the Houston Texans, and I think Vegas kind of agrees here, and that's why you see the 2.5 points. If I was playing a side here, I'd be on the Houston side. Like I said, I kind of expect a bounce back from Houston. We saw the worst, I think, of what that offense is going to look like with Nico. So CJ Stroud probably dropped in a lot of leagues. I think he's a back-end QB2 until further notice, until we see it. I wouldn't want to start him unless I had to. You didn't draft him to start him, so I wouldn't be in a rush to start him unless it's a super flex league. And then Nico, continue to trust Nico. I think we see a bounce-back effort from Nico against Tampa. Drake London was having a really strong day. Like I said, was just almost kind of touchdown there. Could have been reviewed. We didn't even have the right angle of that one. Could have been a touchdown. Could have been a much bigger day for Drake London. But Nico kind of profiles as a similar type of receiver, a little bit more explosive even than Drake London. So give me Nico Collins in this matchup. I think he bounces back in a major way. Jaden Higgins, I was a little concerned about seeing a lack of production there. I want to give it a little bit of extra time. If you need to drop him, go ahead, but I'd rather keep him on the bench and see what he looks like this week. Wouldn't be surprised to see him find the end zone. And then Christian Kirk's got to get back healthy. He was listed out last week, kind of later in the week. I don't know if he's going to be back for this week. Haven't seen the update on him. When it comes to the ground game, I'm not really interested in any of the running backs, especially this week up against Tampa. Even though we saw Bijan play well against them in Tampa, if you look at it like Tampa's, didn't do well against running backs last week, I'm not overly concerned about that. Tampa's a strong team against the ground game. I am staying clear away from Nick Chubb, from Woody Marks, from Dario Gumbalawale, from Dameon Pierce. I'm staying away from this entire ground game until we see something a little bit more consistent. And then the same thing goes for Dalton Schultz. I'm not starting Dalton Schultz, bro. I'm not starting Dalton Schultz. There's no other way to put that. But I do think I think this is going to be a good football game to watch. If I'm watching one of these two games, I'm watching Tampa, Houston. Appreciate everybody who's followed during the stream, everybody who's subbed during the stream, man. Appreciate your guys' support. I'll have content on JN Fantasy about all of these games and rankings coming very soon to the page. Want to get this episode out to you guys instead of making you wait all the way until Friday. And then if you guys have questions, I will do another live either tonight or tomorrow sometime so I can answer a lot more of the questions that came in, especially the start-em, sit-em questions. Hopefully this is helping you guys out and letting you know who to start, who to sit. Chargers and Raiders. This game, 46.5 points on the board. Chargers are favored by 3.5 on this game. So when it comes to Justin Herbert, look the part of elite quarterback last week, man. I haven't always been there with Justin Herbert. I've kind of thought, okay, he was strong early on. This is going to be a run-based offense. I'm probably going to eat a lot of crow when it comes to Justin Herbert. I had him as a mid-tier to back-end QB2. It's not going to be that for him. He looked elite as a passer last week. And, I know that the Chiefs offense is kind of, they're a really strong run-stopping team. But they were taking chances. They made this secondary look silly. And it wasn't just Ladd McConkey. It was Quinn Johnson. It was Keenan Allen. We saw Trey Harris catch the ball. Like, it's going to be – if this is the way things are trending for this Charger offense, Justin Herbert's for sure going to be a top 10 to 12 quarterback this season. For sure, floor. So that's a player I was wrong about. I think I'm going to be wrong about. We got to see how it plays out. But that also means a couple things for a few players on this team. If you drafted Ladd McConkey early, think of him as a wide receiver 2. He's going to be a floor-based wide receiver 2. Probably not have the ceiling that you want. I think I kind of hit on that one. Keenan Allen is going to be a floor-based wide receiver 3. He will have weekly value. Weekly value. Quentin Johnson will be an upside-based flex. I think we'll have some weeks where he has 2 touchdowns. We're going to have some 2 catches for 20-yard weeks with Quentin Johnson as well. Some bad-looking weeks where we see the drops and everybody hates him. But for the most part, I'm ranking these guys. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 2. Keenan Allen, a wide receiver 3. Quinn Johnston, more of a flex, maybe wide receiver 3, but more of a flex, boom or bust type play. That is how I would rank this receiving core. Trey Harris, we're going to have to wait to see what that looks like. Those are the 3 receivers. Ladd, Keenan, Quinn Johnston. The ground game. He drafted Amarian Hampton in the top 4 rounds. I don't think it happens at least till second half of the year. If this passing attack looks like it did last week, Hampton's going to be an RB2. I would need to see something major change. And we haven't really factored in the fact that, like, Najee Harris wasn't involved at all. 18 carries. You love to see it. I think the carries were a very good sign. But the problem that I see is that I think Najee will be more involved as the season goes. Didn't have an offseason. Didn't have a preseason. They couldn't just work him in, 10 to 12 touches. He's an older back. They're probably trying to manage his workload, getting him the reps, make sure he's good to go. I think over the next 2 weeks, we see Najee become more involved, and this thing probably become a little bit of a headache more than we want. I think Hampton will have some strong performances. I 1,000% think that. I think he will have some strong performances. But I do think he is an RB2, a mid-tier to back-end RB2, and not the top 12 running back you hoped you got. Maybe later in the year we get that. But for now, treat him as an RB2, and I would be slightly concerned if we saw Najee with like 6-8 touches this week. If we saw him with 8-10 touches, like that would be a slight pause for concern. The one thing we really didn't get to see is a whole lot of red zone work out of Hampton. We saw a lot of Herbert throwing the football. Curious to see what that looks like over the next week or two. Najee, I'm not advocating for Najee as like a flex. This isn't saying that. I'm just saying Najee might eat into the workload and make things a little bit more balanced than we want. That's all I'm saying. Okay? I know when I say Najee, that's not what I'm doing. As far as tight ends, it was interesting to see Tyler Conklin look like the pass-catching tight end in this. So Tyler Conklin is on the back end tight end 2 radar until he proves otherwise. But it was like, is it Will Dissly? Is it Arondé Gatson? Conklin looks like the guy. Am I wrong about that? Tyler Conklin looks like the main pass-catching tight end in this offense. Not really interested in starting him, but just something to note. And then as far as the Raiders side, it was good to see Geno, man. I had my doubts about Geno and, try to write him off, but he ain't right back. So Geno Smith, and a lot of points here available. I don't know that the Raiders get there. Maybe they do, to be their home opener, so maybe they do. But this Charger defense was a little leaky last week to Mahomes, and we saw a lot of volume come from Mahomes. So I still kind of think Geno's more like QB3-ish. And the thing is, he was willing to sling it, and he really kind of put the ball out there, over 300 yards passing. So I don't know if he gets there against the Chargers this week. I still think he's a QB3. Could surprise me again. Then I'd have to be forced to kind of put him in the QB2 radar moving forward. We saw a lot of good things out of Jacoby Myers, who was upset about his contract. So I think for now, you can continue to keep Jacoby Myers in this wide receiver 3 range. Deontay Thornton had a long catch downfield, kind of a catch, a game-clinching catch for him. So I think Deontay Thornton is just going to be too much of a splash play to trust right now. Jack Besh got involved. So Geno did a really good job at spreading the rock around, but it was Brock Bowers who was the main pass catcher on this team. And I might have been wrong about Brock Bowers as well moving forward. He should be the tight end 1 or tight end 2 again. Like they're going to feature him yet again. So Brock Bowers, if you got him, congratulations. He is a little banged up heading into the week. Want to see his status, but it looks like he's going to be available moving forward and that it wasn't anything serious. As far as Ashton Genty, if you drafted him in the first round, I'd be slightly concerned. If you drafted him like second or third round, I think he'll be fine moving forward. Got in the end zone, but struggled efficiency-wise, 12 carries for 32 yards. I don't think it'll be that bad most weeks, but I just think he's a rookie. It takes time. I was listening to the Pivot podcast, and Bijan Robinson came out and said, his rookie year timing, he was figuring things out. The NFL speed was different, and things were just a little slower for him. And it took him like a year and a half, the middle of his second season, to where things started to speed up for him, or slow down, I should say. Things started to slow down for him, and he sped up. I don't know if it takes that long for Ashton Genty, but I do think he's a rookie, and we have to kind of give him a little bit of grace. And that was the reason why, personally, I faded him at the top of drafts. I think if you give him a few games, we will see the real Ashton Genty soon. For now, I temper my expectations. Leave him as a high-end RB2. He could find the end zone again. He wasn't as involved in the receiving game as I think a lot of people hoped. Same thing for Omarion Hampton, right? Like both of these running backs weren't heavily involved in the receiving game, and that's why a lot of people said they were drafting him over like a Derrick Henry, over some of these other more reliable names. So for me, Ashton Genty, treat him as a high-end RB2. I think he has upside. It's just not as much upside as you're thinking on a weekly basis. And then, like I said, Brock Bowers, elite tight end 1. So that does it for this game-by-game analysis. I'm going to go in and answer a few questions that came into the chat. Shout out to y'all if you rocked with me through the whole thing. Throw some likes in the chat. As far as TikTok, real quick, Herbert or Dak this week? I'm going Herbert. I like Dak a lot, but I'm going Herbert this week. Keon, Ridley, Travion, J-Mo, pick 2. I thought I answered this one already. I said, oh, no, I didn't. It was, let me go Ridley and Keon. No, I'm going Ridley and J-Mo. ETN, Marv, T, Ibuka, pick 3. Marv, ETN, T are for sure. I'm probably benching ETN. I'm going Marv, T, and Ibuka, even though I think ETN does good. I'm going Marv, T, and Ibuka in PPR. Is there concern for Hawk? Should I pick up Ertz? A little concern for Hawk. I'm not overly worried about it, Finnegan. Is Kincaid a top 15 option rest of the season? I would think so, yes. Top 15, yes. Does Sampson have a role in this offense, or should we sell high? I think he has a role, but like if you can sell Sampson as a running back too, I would do it. I would clearly do that. Like to me, if you can sell him as like, here, this is a high floor. This is Jalen Warren last year. I would do that instantly. You think Evan Ingram is a drop? No, I wouldn't call him a drop. I would say hold, see how serious the injury is, and if he plays, let's see what the usage looks like. I'm not mad if you drop him though. I wouldn't call him a drop. I'm not mad if you do. You start Flowers, J-Mo, or Pearsall. Flowers. Say Flowers. I'll start say Flowers. I think J-Mo's just a little risk reward. I think Pearsall with Mac a little bit more risky. I think Flowers is fine. Floor based. Coleman and ETN for Jacobs a lot? No, I think that's fair. It's an overpay. You overpay for the better player, which is how typically trades should go. Trying to do Travion for Warren straight up, get it. Get it. Thank you for all your advice and hard work. Appreciate you, Loco. Thank you, my man. Sometimes it gets to me, man. Not gonna lie to you. Sometimes it gets to me. I love doing this shit though, so I'm just trying to find a way to stay the course. I know it's a long season. I don't want to burn out, and I like putting this shit on. Like I like doing this. Is what I love doing. So I want to make sure I can give you guys the best I can. So thank you for saying that. Thank you. It matters. Help. You got offered Achane and Kirk for ETN and Keenan. Achane, Kirk for ETN and Keenan. Yeah, Jettas, AJ Brown, Marv. Running backs to Taylor, Connor. So you get ETN. Or no, you're giving up ETN. You have Achane, Taylor. I don't mind this deal. Go get the elite back. Your receivers are still elite. You got Jettas, AJ Brown, Marv. This is the kind of deal you do. Go get Achane. Couple questions about Jalen Warren that came in, or excuse me, about Kenneth Walker that came in. Even though it's been 1 week, panic on K9. What do I do about Walker? Chill on Walker. I think chill on Kenneth Walker because there's still time. Like he could come and bounce back. I think one thing that we didn't see is we didn't see him. I talked about this in the show. We didn't see him in the preseason. He was dealing with the injury. They could be working him back in. So I wouldn't overly panic on Kenneth Walker. Kubiak could get him a little bit more involved in the passing game. It's kind of what the game script says this week against Pittsburgh. I talked about that with Breece Hall. he was involved in the passing game. I'd wait a week on Kenneth Walker before I panicked. I would start him as an RB2. If I had somebody I was comfortable with starting ahead of him, feel free, but I think he still belongs in starting lineups as a RB2. Use number one waiver claim on Mooney. No, he's not a number one waiver claim. Just wait it out. And then if you can pick him up for free, do that. I would wait on Mooney if he can clear waivers. And then Tillman or Mason this week. I think Tillman is a better bet in PPR leagues. I will go Tillman. ETN or Walker, I'm going ETN. All right. Listen, y'all, if you want to watch this back, you go to YouTube, Jayhen Fantasy. You can rewatch this on the live stream page. I'll keep it up for another day or two, and then I'm going to try to break this thing up so you guys can watch it in spurts. People said that was helpful, so I'm going to try to do that. They're not very long, but hopefully there was enough information in there. So I will see you guys very soon to go over start-sit questions in more detail. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.